Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to the Merryn Talks Money weekly roundup, our debrief on the biggest stories in markets and economics. I'm Merryn Somerset Webb, editor-at-large for Bloomberg UK Wealth.
I'm John Stepek, author of the Money Distilled newsletter and senior reporter at Bloomberg.
John, we need to talk about poor Rachel Reeves again, don't we?
Poor Rachel Reeves.
You wrote this week about how her next fiscal event is coming up very shortly, and you think she might stand up and say, do you want the good news or the bad news? At which point everyone will roll around laughing because everyone knows that there is no good news.
There is no good news. And, I mean, a lot of this is down to, unfortunately, Rachel Reeves's just lack of political nous, I think, to be honest. It was daft of her to talk up her fiscal rules so aggressively and then leave no room for error in the last budget. And that's basically what she's done. So the fiscal rules themselves are just the same made up nonsense that every kind of like Chancellor's had for years and years now. They pretty much always miss them, but it's all about talking a good game about how you're going to hit them. So they themselves don't matter anywhere near as much as they're made out to matter. But obviously the whole Liz Truss kind of LDI coincidence debacle meant that, you know, Rachel Reeves has made a really big deal of how important it is to meet these rules, otherwise the gilt market will definitely blow up, or at least that's the perception she's trying to give, and so she has to stick to them. She's also said, I'm not going to put up taxes anymore. And so that's why it's basically all kind of fallen on the idea that benefit cuts are somehow going to, you know, fill this black hole. And it will probably fudge the figures enough that the OBR comes back and says, okay, well, you can probably make it as long as we make this outlandish assumption about what's going to happen in 5 years' time.
But the benefit cuts, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about welfare this week and a lot of talk about the various different things that you can access via the welfare system, particularly new cars and so on, Motability, which you and I have talked about and been scandalised by for about 10 years. And now finally everyone else is also scandalised by it. I'm just actually going to read you the first paragraph from The Times today, which I was interested by. Do you want a free new car? There are 167 models to choose from on the Motability website. If you hand over part of your weekly mobility benefit, you can drive away with the leased Kia Picanto worth £15,000. You can go a little further. I won't do the whole thing because we've all got the gist by now. You can go a little further and you can get a BMW i4 M Sport. And when you do that, free road tax, RAC cover, servicing, MOT, tire and windscreen repair, installation of a charge point, blah, 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 blah. But this is interesting because it's one of the first things that's really cut through with the public on the extent to which welfare has become slightly out of control. The idea that 1 in 5 new cars on the road could be part of a welfare scheme is one of the first things that's really got everyone going, well, hang on a tick, have things gone a little bit too far? Are people who are using the system slightly ruining it for everyone who needs the system, etc.? So she had a window. She had a window, didn't she, to do something about welfare and do something about the various problems in the benefit system. But she seems to have only done it to a very mild degree, 5 billion or so. So she's not really helped herself in the way that she possibly could have there.
But that's the problem when you're acting from a place of panic. There should be sensible reforms of this stuff. And it's all very complicated, and it's all because of various different incentives. And also the irritating thing is that people keep taking the statistics at face value. So you'll still get people arguing blind that this, you know, there's been that mental health issues have rocketed because of, you know, COVID or because of social media or whatever. When in fact, the obvious kind of point is that there's been a change in the benefit system that has made people decide to apply for disability benefits rather than the previous jobless benefits, which have changed. So that's what's driven it, and we need a much more clear-eyed view of this stuff. And unfortunately you don't get that because politics, but also because Rachel Reeves has left herself in this sort of panic zone where she needs to find money fast. And probably all that will happen actually is that whatever does get done will mean that some unusually honest group of people who genuinely need this stuff will get locked out of the system, and everyone who's scamming it will still be able to scam it.
Yeah. Well, we have ideas for her, though, don't we? We have ideas. I might have ideas
Do
on
we?
welfare. We'll come back to that another time. Yeah, we do. There are lots of things she could do. She could sell the Bitcoin. We're one of the biggest, the UK government is one of the biggest holders of Bitcoin in the world, along with the US government and the North Korean government. I gather an awful lot of Bitcoin.
Interesting. She missed the top.
She missed the top, but still, nonetheless, she could give it a go. She could instruct the Bank of England to sell the rest of the gold.
Yes, revalue the gold. Do what the thing we're doing in America.
Okay, there is one group of people who really feel that they could help Rachel Reeves out a lot, and I'm glad about that because she needs someone behind her, and that is a new group called the Patriotic Millionaires UK. And we've talked about this a lot before, John, but only in the US context. There's a group of the apparently super rich in the US who think that everything can be solved if they pay more tax. So they would like to be forced to pay more tax by the government. They don't want to do it voluntarily. I don't know why, but they want the government to force them and other rich people to do it. Now, we have our very own network of millionaires. Patriotic Millionaires UK is a non-partisan network of British millionaires, multiple industries and backgrounds from across the UK. It delivers a single mission. Missions, we're back to missions. A single mission to leverage the voice of wealth. Who knew wealth had a voice? To build a better Britain by changing the system to end extreme wealth and make those with it make their fair and proper contribution. So what they want is a wealth tax at a couple of percent a year, and they've had a van going around Westminster with various slogans on it about how the well-off should pay more tax. I'm not particularly keen on this. I'd like to hear your views on it. I'm not particularly keen on it because all the evidence shows that it won't work. Wealth taxes are very, very difficult to implement. The very wealthy are very mobile. They mostly just leave. And that's why almost nobody has a wealth tax of this type anymore. And the other thing I would say is that the government is already doing its absolute utmost to tax wealth. The UK has a lot of wealth taxes. Inheritance tax is a wealth tax. Non-indexed capital gains is a wealth tax. You're paying tax on inflation gains, nominal gains rather than real gains. So that stamp duty is a wealth tax. It's a wealth tax when you see stamp on your equity trading, and it's a wealth tax when you see it on the buying and selling of houses. So that's 3 just for starters. I wouldn't have said that we need a new one, but John, you may feel differently.
No, I don't feel differently. I think that the tax system overall should be simplified, and I think that if it was simplified, then you would probably start to balance out unearned income and earned income. But I think that's a completely different issue. I mean, the practical point is actually the most important one, regardless of anything else. If you are saying that we should charge the super wealthy, whoever you define super wealthy as, if you're saying that you should charge a group of people 1% of their overall value a year.
I think they're after 2, actually.
Well, yeah, exactly, between 1 and 2%. Those people will leave because it's worth their while to leave. Because if you're taking 2% a year, eventually you won't have enough to be over the threshold. Quite aside from whether that wealth is kind of liquid or not, and a lot of the time it's not liquid, it's just worth paying pretty much any price to move to a country that is not going to do that to you. And there's plenty of them. So,
well, one of the things it really does do is it really, really does disincentivize any kind of entrepreneurialism or capital formation. So, if you set up a company that in, say, fintech of some kind, and it's valued on paper at £30 million, but it isn't really worth £30 million because you can't sell any of it. You can't liquidate 2% of a company like that here or there. So what do? Well, you just leave.
I think another really important point is that this is already happening right now with the new inheritance tax changes. No, because I think what often gets overlooked, and actually kind of unaccountably somewhat gets overlooked, is that it's not just the farmers who have large amounts of illiquid assets and relatively low liquid income with which to then pay off the inheritance tax bill, and therefore may need to break up their businesses. There's plenty of family businesses that are in the same situation. And I think probably they haven't attracted as much attention because perhaps they don't want to draw as much attention to themselves, and because there are solutions, but they're expensive solutions. So I think that, as you say, we already are getting to the point where the wealth tax are quite detrimental and disincentivising. Taking it any further is going to be a mistake.
Yeah, they also stop people coming here. I was having a conversation only this week about someone who would have been living in the UK but is not living in the UK because he doesn't want to be classified as a resident in the UK because he doesn't want to fall into the 10 years for the IHT net. So we have people who don't come here as a result. And it's a bit like with Scotland's income taxes being higher than England's income taxes. You can't measure who didn't come. You can't measure who didn't come, and it really matters. But I said I had ideas today. I'm only offering solutions today. I'm not offering problems. So I have a solution for the Patriotic Millionaires UK. And I'm going to give you the entire website address because I want to make absolutely sure that they can really get there. www.gov.uk/guidance/voluntary payments donations to government. Now you can go there and you can give as much of your money as you like to the government right now. Right now, just go there, do it, hand the money over. They can just hand it directly to Motability. Bob's your uncle.
I mean, they could take all the grants they get for having the institutions that spread these, the van driving around, Westminster or the rest of it, and put that money towards the government. Because, I mean, that must be a few £100,000, would have thought, maybe.
I don't think the van costs that much. It doesn't look like that great a van. That's deflection, John. Deflection from the core, which is that you can give as much money to the government as you like. No one is stopping you. Never has. So that's my top tip for the day. Top tip.
There's non-partisan idea as well. I would take issue with that ever so slightly. It's not non-partisan to want to get rid of wealth. And the underpinning organisations that these are spin-offs from are generally things you would describe as being, I think, quite far left would be a reasonable description. The Tax Justice Network, I think. They kind of have all these like patriotic millionaires, but it's, that's just a cover.
I'm feeling a bit mean about the Patriotic Millionaires. I've had a quick run down the list of who they are. I'd be quite interested to see proof from all of them that they'd qualify for said tax. But that's just mean. Anyway, so my top tip today has been for people who are rich and would like to be less rich, which is perfectly valid. But I think your top tip today is probably for people who'd like to be richer, coming up to the end of the tax year.
Yes. So I guess ahead of the spring statement, just in case, because I know that Rachel wants to keep it quiet, and that would be great. If she can make it just one budget a year, that'd be great. But you just don't know what she's going to stand up and say next Wednesday. So you need to use your annual allowances. You need to use the few remaining legal tax breaks that are open to you as a civilian of the UK. So, your £20,000 ISA allowance, your £60,000 pension allowance, that is assuming you haven't got stuff to carry over and that you earn at least £60,000. But also capital gains tax. This one just struck me because 2 years ago, the capital gains tax allowance was just over £12,000. Yeah. And if you're not someone who's like mega rich, and if you don't sell assets very often, and if you don't do a lot of trading, you probably haven't really thought about that if you've got anything outside, because it would probably be covered. But now, it's down to £3,000. If you were holding some daft wee stock that maybe a pal had told you about and you happened to get lucky, and don't own it in your ISA because you're being a bit careless, there's a good chance that you actually might own capital gains tax this year if you sold it. So just, look at what you've got, have a think about what's not already sheltered, and just make the effort to either get it in an ISA or think about realising some losses and some gains under the limit this year, and then just sort of like making better use of your CGT allowance each tax year, because it really is so small now.
Very, very wise advice, John. Thank you very much. And just be absolutely clear, Patriotic Millionaires, that advice was not for you. That was not for you. Don't do any of those things, okay? Thanks for listening to this week's Merryn Talks Money debrief. If you like our show, rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to follow me and John on X or Twitter at MerrynSW and John_Stepek. This episode was produced by Sam Asadi, production support and sound designed by Moses Ander. Our executive producer is Brendan Francis Newnham. Questions or comments in this show and all our shows are always welcome. Our show email is merrynmoney@bloomberg.net. So do get in touch if you have any ideas for Rachel Reeves that we could explore on the show. She'll appreciate it.